Welcome to the another video in this series, and today we are going to define identity as the primary security perimeter. This is the new topic in the syllabus. So, in order to understand this, we need to understand why now and what was happening earlier, what has changed. So, just to give this topic in the perspective, earlier what was happening, there was always a office location. We're talking about traditional or the legacy way or the old days, right? There is a physical office, and inside the physical office we have our network, and anything inside that network was uh, trusted. Okay, you may have the application, you may have the servers, anything that we usually browse inside the IT environment, maybe apps, maybe servers, right? And even you yourself is inside the same physical building with your own laptop or desktop. You're accessing these applications, right? So there was no issues because everything was trusted inside this network, because everything is inside this physical office. So this was the old way of doing things, but it has a lot of challenges. Why? Because we progress, we grow, and a lot of demands came. For example, what happened earlier, you were deploying your Exchange, your Word, everything in your physical location. Now, what happened? Cloud happened. What happened? Cloud happened. So now let's suppose this is our Azure, okay, and because of cloud we have SaaS application. You don't need to deploy your infrastructure inside your physical offices for Microsoft 365, which has number of programs, right? Like Salesforce. So the SaaS applications, so all the SaaS applications are not hosted in your physical location, right? They are external, they are on the cloud. Somebody else is managing those. And we talked about the responsibility model, shared responsibility model. So you understand, right? Now we also have demands of using own devices, right? They are not always a huge organizations which are giving laptops or mobile phones to everyone. There are small organizations as well which allow you to use your device to access or work. There may be a flexibility where people are allowed to access corporate so that they can work through their own tablet, their mobile phone, their own laptop, because a lot of applications are SaaS. Right, so there's a bring your own device. We cannot do that here because nobody is trusting if you're accessing it from outside, right? Let's try to explain this. If you are sitting here, okay, and you try to access this application via internet as per old way, you will not be allowed until there are specific exclusions or other things are in place. But usually everything is inside. Everybody was going to the office, but now we are working from home. Okay, so we can access our applications from wherever we are, from whatever device we are using, over the internet, because these are hosted in cloud with proper security measures in place. We have IoT devices, right? So there are so many reasons this thing got developed. And now if we cannot think physical or perimeter as a security perimeter, this is network perimeter, security perimeter, because we are accessing the applications which are not even hosted in our data center from anywhere in the world, from any device that you would like to. Those are the situations or scenarios in today modern days. So what we could do, if we could not control the physical location, we can control the applications that we have. How? By making identity as the primary security perimeter. So now I hope this make sense, right? Why identity is the new security perimeter? Because instead of relying solely on the network based security like firewalls and VPNs, modern enterprises secure their assets based on identity. Based on identity. And if you remember, when we have Azure, we have MS Entra to manage our identities. Hence, uh, identity becomes the first security perimeter because physical office is not in our control. The perimeter is not in our control because of the modern changes, modern requirement. So what can we control? Primarily, let's make the security move towards identity so that whosoever is accessing, we know or we can verify explicitly that we saw in the previous video, right? So this is what define identity as the primary security perimeter topic means. The total concept is this. Now, because identity is going to be the security perimeter, so we need to understand what all could be identity and what is identity. Well, identity is a unique set of attributes that define. It could be a person, okay? It could be an application, it could be a device, right? So anything on which we can assign permissions so that this that principal can access particular resource or perform its task could be an identity. It's not like only a user or a human being or a person would be identity. Even application could be identity, even device could be an identity. So if it is a person, it could be username and password that we usually do when we log into the Azure portal. It could be uh, MFA, it could be other way of authenticating, but identity we understand, like we do username password, but application cannot type its password, type its username. So it might be using API keys, might be using service credentials, might be using managed identities, right, which is managed by the Microsoft. If it is a device, again, device cannot put username and password, but of course it could have its own IP address, it could have the certificate or any other security posture, such as an updated antivirus status, like for the compliance, and only then it will allow to access the corporate data or something like that. So identity, it could be many things on which we can apply the permissions to perform any task, right? For example, your inside Azure, we have an app server and we have a DB server, right? What we can do, we can let the app server access DB via managed identity. That can also be done. Rather embed the username and password inside the application, which is old way. But in the new way, identity is the security perimeter. So we'll try to control identity from wherever possible by applying all kind of authentication management. Now, by shifting security focus on identity based protection, organization can secure access to remote employees, right, without relying on just a physical way. uh, it can prevent unauthorized access through MFA, right? It can detect risk login attempts and block suspicious activities before they can cause harm through the features of MS Intra. So we know we can secure our identity. There are means, there are various measures that we can take, but the focus has changed from physical or the perimeter security to identity security. I'm not saying we are not going to apply any security on the perimeter. We will. This is just for the understanding. Our primary security perimeter would be identity. Okay. Now, there are four pillars of an identity infrastructure. Okay. What are those four pillars? We need to understand that. The very first thing is administration. Okay. Why? What are these? Let me call out all: authentication, authorization, and auditing. What are these? Well, these are a well-structured identity infrastructure. Okay, because identity is the primary security perimeter, so we need to have a well-structured identity infrastructure, and it includes these A4 or 4As. Administration. So administration is all about the life cycle management of the users, like the creation, okay, management, governance, right? And of course, deleted. So it's the life cycle. It's the entire life cycle of a user that will fall under the admin, including the governance, what they can access, what they cannot access, all those things. So if we say what could be the key functionality of administration, it would be identity lifecycle management, ensuring user accounts are created when needed, updated when rule changes, and deleted when users leave the organization. Then our back will fall under the administration. We apply through least privilege principle, group or policy management, like managing users in security groups and applying access policy to ensure proper governance. Provisioning and deprovisioning will also fall under the administration. Now, auth. Before that, we could take a simple example. When a new employee joins a company, their Azure Enter ID account is automatically created, assigned to the appropriate security groups, and given access to the necessary applications. When they leave the company, their access is automatically revoked to prevent unauthorized use. That would be the well structured identity infrastructure under administration. Now, authentication, proving identity with secure verification. Authentication ensures that a system can accurately verify who a user, device, or service is before granting access. It involves the act of providing identity through credentials such as passwords, biometrics, and authentication tokens. We all understand what is authentication. It's just proving who you are, like your office card or your Aadhaar card. But if you have a license, then you can drive a car. That's a authorization to drive a car. It could also be act as an identity for authentication. So we understand authentication, and it could be single factor authentication by username and password. It could be MFA, which require more than one factor to authenticate, like UDP, not UDP, OTP. UDP. I was working on one of the NBA projects, so came to UDP. It's OTP that we usually get. We could have password-less authentication, right, like biometrics, or we can have adaptive authentication, where users do the authentication, risk-based authentication to enforce security dynamically, or conditional access. So there are multiple ways we can define authentication in a secure way. Now you have proved who you are. Authorization will let you prove what you can do. Once you are, like, for example, in Azure portal, when we log in with our ID and password. Now we can see Azure as per the permission that we have. Or we can do, maybe we can not create any VM because we don't have the authorization to create the VM. We don't have the permissions. Maybe we can only see. Maybe we can create, but we cannot delete. So authentication is proving who you are. Authorization is what can you do, right? So the third point is authorization. Once a user is authenticated, authorization determine what resources they can access, what actions they can perform, the permissions, the roles. It grants or denies access based on identity data, roles, and policies. Here it comes the RBAC that we've been talking about. Authentication came through verify explicitly, right? Here is least access privilege principle comes in the authorization. Or we can have conditional access here under authorization, like we will only authorized if you are meeting the conditions. Maybe you are accessing from a location that has never been registered, so you need to do the MFA, and only then it will authorize to you, right? Or we zero least privileged, I've already mentioned. Or we can also have ABAC, which is attribute based authentication or like authorization, where we grant access based on specific attributes, example location, department, designation, security level. So when we make our identity primary security perimeter, we should focus on these four: admin, authorization, and auditing, because we would like to know who is doing what they're doing. Auditing, right? So what falls under auditing? Auditing ensures that identity activities are monitored, logged, and reviewed, right? We also review, if you remember, we talked about in our previous videos, the access reviews, like who has the access, what they can do, whether they need that much of permission, whether they are there in the office anymore or they have already left. Anything, what is happening is auditing ensures identity activities are monitored, logged, and reviewed for security, compliance, and troubleshooting. Auditing helps answer questions like who did what, when, where, and how in the environment. So the key functionality of auditing would be logging and reporting, alerting, risk analysis, or maybe compliance, access reviews. Those will fall under the auditing. So I hope this topic under SC fundamental security and compliance will be clear now. We understand why identity is primary security perimeter, because the entire way of working has changed. Right? We have different kind of demands in the modern environment. And in order to make the identity security perimeter best, we should have a well structured identity infrastructure, which includes administration, lifecycle management, if possible, the fully automation, authentication. We should have best authentication methods in place, not only single factor but multi-factor, authorization as least privilege principle, auditing as per multiple. If we are using MS Entra, we get most of the things by default. MS Entra has all those features. We might need to pay a little more for the license, but all these features are there and we must utilize them. With this, I would like to close the video. Well, thank you for watching and you guys have a wonderful day. Bye bye.